Let me talk for a minute. So here's the thing. When you have a complex thing like a game on a build, it's software development. Make no mistake. Game development is software development. That's complex enough. But then you have the psychology, the player to deal with, the entertainment presentation that's complex too in its own way. And yeah, okay. The difficulty curve is steep. Yes? All right. So the good thing about design is you are always improving. If you realize that can help you in any situation because you will just improve from there, then you realize there's a really good thing about that. You are free. You are free to boldly start in any situation. You're free to go forward. You're free to start. You're free to go crazy. Because the other half of design is to rigorously test those crazy, free ideas you had, you can be free and crazy at first. And then you will rigorously test. If we were to just stop at the free and crazy, well, we would just be lucky to get anything good. We don't want to rely on luck. Business doesn't want to rely on luck. I mean, our players don't want to be subject to luck in terms of the design of the game. No, we want to be sure. So the second half of our design process is testing. It's rigorous testing to ensure that it is serving the needs of the player. I bring all this up because there are times when your crazy, free, wild ideas work really well. There are times when your crazy ideas run smack into the reality that is the rigorous testing. And we need to face that reality. We need to face that reality and use it for what it is, which is a benefit. It's a good thing. We've done this before on our project. We're making a game called Shuffle Wars, and we've already run into this at least once. I'm sure many more times than just once, but in particular, the design of our card started out as something incredibly basic because we just needed to get things going. We knew that there were going to be cards in our game, and we knew that we were going to want a picture on the card, as battle card games have. We wanted stats on our card, as battle card games have. Turns out the names of these cards that we select and put into battle, the names were interesting, and in fact they became a central part to the silliness of the game. So we knew these parts needed to be there for the design of the card. And so we started with a very simple utilitarian design for the cards. It's on the left here. This diagram shows roughly a large picture for the card and then a bar chart for the stats. The 5 stats represented in a bar chart, a little label at the bottom to show you that one is power, the other's defense, speed, health, and luck. Yes? We said, well, that's good enough for now. We're just implementing this card design as part of the rest of the game. Let's just get to the actual mechanics of the card game, which we hadn't developed yet. And so we move forward. We were free to boldly start, yes? And then later we said, well, wait, let's redesign this card because we could get a larger picture. We definitely need to see the name of the card. Turns out that's really important. So let's redesign the card to like really highlight with a space for the name. We made a big space at the top of the card for the name. We enlarged the area for the card picture by making it a portrait or vertical layout. and this really clever idea. You know what? This bar chart takes up so much space. Let's get super clever and make a dial out of each stat so that you read it like it's in a circle, though, and that's a very consistent thing. There's no wasted space. It's all in this circle dial kind of meter for the power, defense, speed, health, and luck. This will be great. And so we spent time making a dial that would be dynamic and could be just fed in with a number, and it would display the number as well as the meter of the dial, and we could fill in the name as well on the card, and then we could have a vertical portrait picture, and it was so cool. We put it all together, and it was garbage. We went through the process, and you have to go through the process. This rough diagram of the two card layouts, maybe we could have kind of seen the problems with the dial, but honestly, you can't see the problems with the dial until you start to see like a 1 or a 3 represented on the dial. It just makes it incredibly hard to read. It's hard to see. Since the stats are really important for selecting the card, the readability of the stats is actually king. Yes, we really want the name to be prominent. We're going to have to figure that out. Yes, we absolutely want to highlight pretty looking card pictures. Yes. But if you can't see the stats, you really can't play the game properly. It's a primary concern for the player. It's a need, and we just didn't serve it well. This need for the player to read the stats was being left behind in favor of some crazy, wild, free idea about redesigning the card effectively for design's sake, for redesigning sake, which is just not a good reason at all. It's always best to do it for the player. In this case, the player doesn't want this. Can't read it, can't use it. Please go back to the old design. So we did. We abandoned this design after all of that work. Now this is a lesson in the process of design to highlight that this is also an improvement. I would have been wondering, is this a better idea for a long time if I hadn't done it? And I think it's clear now that the stats and the readability of the stats has to be king in the design of the card. Well, that's going to cause a new set of needs for the player to be addressed in the redesign of the card. Eventually, we're going to come back to this card design and try to make it better again. But now we're well informed about this abject failure of the redesign we tried before. In other words, we are free to go crazy with the wild ideas, and then we test. We test with the hope, of course, that it's a great idea and we could just move forward. But if we don't, and if it is an abject failure, we have to be honest, we have to be rigorous, we have to evaluate it clearly and get the most out of it. This failure is only a failure if we don't do it or if we ignore the results. Instead, we see the results clearly, we know it's a failure, and we know why. And so any redesign we do after this, which is, we've gone back to this design, and if we do another design, we are now well informed. Okay. So I mention all this partly because it is a fact of the process of design. You will have good ideas, you will have bad ideas, and you won't necessarily know which is good or bad until you test. And once you test, you need to be honest, you need to evaluate clearly, and remain objective. Your goal is not to appease your ego about your idea. Your goal is to address the needs of the player. So with that in mind, let's just call it. We did that again. We had a great idea. Went down the road of rigorously testing a thing, and I'm about to call it because I believe it's clear that we have failed, and we can clearly evaluate how we failed and why so that we can do better. In this case, I'm talking about sound. The sound design and specifically the vocal ideas for the game Shuffle Wars includes, narrating the story. Our campaign mode has story that is put together in a procedural way, but basically looks random. If you are familiar with Mad Libs, it's a structure of a story with spaces open for key points in the story, key elements in the story, people, places, things, actions, etc. And then you fill those spaces in with random words. The game is you ask somebody for some words and they don't know what context they're filling it into. Then you put these words in the story and you read that person back the story, and it's funny. In our case, the story that is shown to the player for our campaign was really just there to give any context for why they're going to battle somebody. We're going to name that somebody as a villain. We're going to explain that they did something bad to some people. The bad thing is that they took away something before some event that the people care about. And so the people are sad. Then you go into battle. And now that opponent is named. And it didn't really matter what the people, event, object, thing is at all. It's just that there's some context. Something there is suggested as a reason why you are battling, because you're going to help these people. And if you win, you come back and you get the resolution to the story because the villain was defeated, the thing was returned, and the people can enjoy the event and they're happy. Okay. We have 32 different formats of that story. It's read in different ways. And then those 6 elements, villain, bad feeling, good feeling, people, object, and event, they are thrown into the beginning of the story, the end of the story, and it's in such a way that it makes a cohesive story. When you put the battle in the middle, you've got a beginning, middle, and end. Okay. We have that in text in our game. And although this is only representative of the story, this is just a test representing that story. I've got an error. Is that true? Can we do that again? What we're meant to do, there we go, is show that there is some structure with these words that will go into this, words or phrases that will go into this space. For a beginning, where the people are feeling bad because the villain, and then you win the battle and you come back and now they're feeling good because you're the hero. This structure was just meant to display the words. And that's what we have now in our campaign. That actually works great. In fact, we even do a little Mad Lib on the villain's name. We jumble these words together to make it feel like a comically important person who's done bad things. And so that's motivation enough for most people to say, well, let's take them down. Especially if they've done bad things to people who are hoping you can help them. This is just a suggestion of real-life motivation that humans would actually feel. We're just suggesting it, which is enough in our game to get people on board and to play. Oh, I know why the error's there. So this was the idea that launched a new free and crazy idea, which is, hey, I know some people who do really good voice work. Could I get them to voice the words that we throw into these story templates? And in that way, they're like narrating the story. Wouldn't that be great? So we don't just read the text, but you're hearing the story read to you. Like it's bedtime, like it's a fantasy fairy tale story. Isn't that fun? Especially if it's a silly story, that could be great. These people are good at voice, and they can give a performance that is serious, which is a perfect counter to the silliness of the story. This would be great. This would be great. So that's the free and crazy idea. Let's test. And the test for this storytelling, involves, well, I need to talk to my voice people and say, could you please? And they were immediately like, what? Like, what are you even talking about? And I realized, oh, I need to like legitimately demonstrate for them what it is that I'm asking them to do. In that way, that started me to do the fuller, rigorous test to see what this would actually be like. All right. So I recorded myself doing one format. That format we just read. The beginning and the end is in a format that is, made up just for this test. And there would be an audio clip for these things that I would use in this test, and then there would be audio clips for the other 6 elements: the object, the event, the people, the villain, the good feeling, and the bad feeling. And then this script would actually put the pieces together, put the voice clips together to make a single audio clip to play. As you can see, there's a little bit of code involved in this, but the mechanics are pretty straightforward. You saw the format on the screen. You can understand there are individual vocal audio clips that are ready to be inserted. And so I'm literally taking data from each clip, like literally, here's data right here. Literally taking data from each clip, including the formats, the beginning format, the end format, and I'm filling a series of an array of floats with all of that data. It's, lots of data, but it doesn't matter. This is relatively straightforward. I just say, go get it. Audio clips can do this in Unity. So I have all of the clips as data, and I'm literally saying, okay, wait, how big is it? Let me see. It's right here. Let me compose there it is, compose the storytelling. So I literally, step 1, analyze the story and say, how big is it? And so I read all of the pieces that have been selected, all 6 of the insert pieces like object and event and people, and the format itself. They're composed after that, because I know how long it is, I can say, then make a blank audio clip of that length. And now, because I already have the data as a series of floats, it's literally each sample is one float. And I'll just append one after the other. Just add to that empty clip all the data. So first I start with fragments of the story, and then I insert some element of the story, like a person or the villain or the good feelings or the bad feelings. And I'm just throwing the data in there and done. Literally, that's it, because then it is an audio clip that can be played, just like any other. So suddenly, you can hear the voice. And that's good. All this work. I also, by the way, did this for our villain. so that you can get the surname, the first name, and the last name of the villain as well. Actually, let me show you that real quick. Retreat to the jungle for a moment. If I oops. Okay. So I copied some of the code and put it into a text file just so I could read it quickly, because literally I use this for reading. These are the names of our battle cards, for example. And this is the part of the code that holds the individual pieces of a villain's name. Begins with a surname like Mr., Mrs., Doctor, Duke, Queen, Governess, Friar, right? So the beginning of their name starts with this piece. Then there's the middle part of their name, which is their first name. And I used food. And you might notice it's in alphabetical order, so I just used a food name that starts with a letter. So you can see there's 26 of these. And then the last part of their name, the third part, their last name, is some terrible thing. So curse, mess, trouble, hassle, yes. This is the kind of stuff, yeah? So you put these three things together and you get funny names like Mrs. Apple Hex or Duke Waffle Trouble, yes? And so these are the silly villain names that we have in the campaign. And I'm putting them together here as well. In other words, I needed to record all those lines as well. And recording them was not such a big deal. I could simply begin a recording and read them off. But after a few tests of this, including, I think I already did a stream of this, it sounded kind of bad. It was so disjointed how the vocal performance was crammed together from effectively different vocal performances that you couldn't get a smooth reading of the story. I saw that really early on, and I suspected it might happen, but I needed to go through the rigor of testing to see it. And what I heard in the vocal performance was something like this. The evil Mrs. Apple Hex stole the light of the forest before the autumn festival, which causes the eastern people of the forest to be sad. Like, it was a really disjointed and broken reading. So I was still hopeful maybe this could still work. Maybe I could do one of two things. We could very carefully modulate the inflection of particular words. I mean, what makes the reading of things more graceful is when you can read them all together. You put together an inflection. You can hear my voice going up, and then there's some sort of moment where it comes down again. That vocal inflection, going up, going down at particular times, and pausing when it needs to pause, and not pausing when it shouldn't pause. These are the qualities that make a reading good. It's what makes people who are good at voice acting work good at what they do. This is what they do well. What I would be, first of all, what I realized when I was doing the vocal performance, I realized immediately I would be asking these very nice people to do exactly what they are not trained to do, or exactly what they are not good at. And it was torture for me. I can't imagine what it would be like for someone who is good at reading lines well. So I realized that was a problem right off the gate. But I also thought maybe I could very carefully adjust my performance in reading all of these things. And by the way, there's 32 of each of these different parts of the story and different parts of the villain name and all that stuff. I could very carefully modulate my vocal tone to be a particular way so that it would be at least neutral or work well for, like in the villain's name case, I might go Sir Apple Hex, meaning bum, bum, bum. Having the tone one way in all of the surnames, having a tone in another way, just a little bit higher for the first name, and then lower for the last name. Every one that I read being a particular tone. That turned out to be really hard, very awkward. I did it, but this is all in service of a test. This is all trying to get towards a test where I could hear the result. And I needed to be rigorous enough to actually do all of the clips. At first, I was just using some individual clips that I had grabbed once, but then I decided I needed to actually hear what it's like when it's a random set of things. At the same time, I can evaluate what it would be like to have my vocal performance people record. I needed to keep going down the road, even though it was starting to look pretty grim. It was looking pretty terrible. Yet, I needed to see, what would this sound like? What would this be like? So now this test, and I just played this before, and I literally just figured out why this error is here. Let's hope the error doesn't come up. It's because one of the elements is in the wrong place. Well, this test now has a villain that is put together the way the villain's name is in our campaign. This is just one format. In fact, it's not one of the formats we have in the game, but it's a good test. And then all of the elements are actually read. So this is a fuller, more rigorous, more complete test. And so now, even though I'm not the best vocal performance person, I can evaluate how well is this going to work if, for example, I get good people to read it with the right tone of voice and the right quality of their voice. Could I get this to work? So one way to make it work would have been to modulate the inflection of the words being read so it would match better. The other way to make this work is to literally go with it. If it is so disjointed, then maybe we can go really far with that and make it obviously disjointed as comedy. Maybe. Again, we have to be objective and evaluate it appropriately, but what if, along with the reading of the words, it's disjointed as you hear it, but it's also disjointed as you see it, like literally written out so that, as in here, where I'm printing it out with a little underline for each element in the story, it's gone even further, and it's like a Post-it sticker over this word, and it's, scrawled in crayon in this one. And for this one, it's like spray painted with, red spray paint or something. And on this one, it's like it's written, it's carved into a board, and the board is nailed onto the card that's showing you the story. Like literally comically disjointed story, visually and vocally, as well as the context. Like the context is already silly. When you read it, it is obviously silly. So if we went really far, maybe that would work. So here I am now at a place where I have all the pieces, I could do a rigorous test, and I'm listening for. Here is what that sounds like. Let me here, do this. And I'm gonna start this. The evil friar Vinegar Pane stole the last box of cookies before the day of winter hope, and now the street urchins are faithless. There's a pause, then the end. With the last box of cookies returned to the street urchins, they are dancing, and all can enjoy the day of winter hope, even Friar Vinegar Pane. Okay. Terrible. It is disjointed. The evil Sir Squash Nuisance stole the golden necklace of love before the last evening of summer, and now the smallest woodland creatures are fearful. I have zero faith this can be smooth. With the golden necklace of love returned to the smallest woodland creatures, they are relieved, and all can enjoy the last evening of summer, even Sir Squash Nuisance. I had some really inventive ideas about how to modulate the inflection. The evil egg affliction stole the sacred soup before the last moon of summer, and now the tree folk are bummed. But no, this is terrible. With the sacred soup returned to the tree folk, they are feeling uwu, and all can enjoy the last moon of summer, even evil egg affliction. So my only recourse now is to go with the crazy. The evil Dame Kimchi Hurdle stole the heirloom parade banner before the Frisbee championship match, and now the dwarves of the East are sad. With the heirloom parade banner returned to the dwarves of the East, they are joyful, and all can enjoy the Frisbee championship match. So what we've got is a result that I can evaluate clearly and objectively if I stand back and say, okay, this was a great idea. Yes, that was a lot of work. What is the result? Because remember, this isn't about you. This is about the player. What is the player hearing? Well, it's even hard to hear. It's hard to understand. It's hard to make sense of it. It's hard to stay attentive to it. It's hard to take it at all with the seriousness that would, just the minimal seriousness that would be required to follow it. It's so disjointed, it's distracting. Now, my voice aside, which, I mean, it's not the best performance, but let's also take into account that that was actually really hard to get that crappy quality. I was extremely careful about some tone that I was trying to reach while reading every word. And although I recorded it at different times, there's different qualities to my voice in each time, it would be really hard to get a consistent reading. This would be a really tough situation for my vocal people. I don't want to do that to them, first of all, but let's stay objective. I would prefer that the player get the story that is silly, but also about fantasy and the setup that includes you as the hero. You're going to be the hero because these people are sad. Villain did a bad thing, go get the villain. When you come back, yay, you're a hero, you did good things. Because now you brought the thing back before the festival. It's good. The people are happy. You helped them. You're the hero. That's the core of what the story needs to do. And right now, I made it all about this vocal performance. My vocal performance aside, there's a big problem with the way this is being presented. This test shows there's a problem with this. it works so much better in text because there isn't a disjointed quality to reading the text. The vocal performance, you can't help but be completely distracted by the disjointed quality of the words. It's hard to follow a story you haven't heard before, and so we use inflection when we read and when we speak to make it clearer. I just did it with that last sentence. When that's taken away and you have to totally put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, it's actually really hard to understand what was just said. And that's kind of what we're doing with this vocal performance. So this idea was really cool. Man, do I want like the bedtime fairy tale reading of the story to you, even though it is silly, because that would be an awesome setup for the combat and an awesome resolution to the match that you just went through in our game. But and the system is cool because it can literally do millions of different stories, and it's cohesive. They have a beginning, middle, and end. That's all great. But if that's the performance that the player sees, we lose big time. It does not meet their needs, and it doesn't do that aim that we were going for. It fell short. It failed. And this failure was an important thing to evaluate and to realize so that we understand, well, first of all, that I'm not going to do that. I can't do that at that point. Even the crazy idea of going with it and making it obviously disjointed is too distracting. So I'm not going to do that. And it's sad to get to that point after doing all this work, but it is so good to know that that's a bad idea instead of just doing it. So yes, we did the work. Yes, we got to that point. Yes, it is a failure. But it's a failure telling us more things about what is important for the player. Can I get a story time feeling out of just the words? Maybe pictures and animation? Yeah. Could we get a vocal performance that supports that while not being the disjointed reading of words that I just did? Yeah, actually we could. In other words, we might be able to get the best of both worlds. You got the text giving the silly story. You have pictures and animation showing you the people that you're going to help. Maybe even the villain coming in silhouette and the thing being taken away, the object of the people want being taken away. So they're sad. We could even have a vocal performance that helps to support the villain without actually saying words, going like, ha ha ha. And the people being sad about it without using words, like, oh. Now those simple little sounds aren't actual words, and we wouldn't want to distract from the reading of the story. But imagine those things put together. You have a story. Probably have some background music. You have images of people, an image of an object, a silhouette of a villain coming in, the object being taken away and villain leaving, and the people being sad, and you hear awe as the story is presented to you in text. It's not being read to you, but I think we've gone down the road to realize it can't be read to you. Unless we limit the number of stories that we present, we're not going to get story read to you. Not in the way that we want. Now, I have some experience actually working with people who did some AI vocal work and stuff. We could. We literally could have a database of a vocal performance of particular people and then use that AI to do any story we want. Yes, we could totally do that. Am I going to do that? No, I'm not going to do that. I mean, for a couple of reasons, but instead, I'm going to find another way, and I think we're going to use what is most successful in the ways that support the player the best, and the result will be centered on the player. Yes? So if we've learned anything with this process, is that failure can happen, and we can't turn away from that. Yes? The failure in this case is helping us make the product better because, first of all, we're not going to do that. And second of all, we know the qualities we should lean on to do better. And I think we have those. We're going to have art, we're going to have music, we have the words, we're going to have some animation, and I'm going to ask my vocal people to help me with the vocals, just not in that way. And that's a good thing, because that was actually a really hard vocal thing for me to do. I would not want my vocal people to do that. So I'm glad my people asked me, what the heck are you talking about? Because it got me to actually do the rigorous test and get to this point where I realize what I actually need them to do is something else. And that's good. We're doing good. What we talk about is game design and best practices, and this is one of them. To chase down crazy ideas, cool, but that's half the story. The other half is rigorous testing and objective, realistic evaluation of the results of that test. Gotta get real. If we're meeting the needs of the player, we're doing well. And I think that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'll cut the stream short at this point. I'm not going to go down this road any further other than to just present this result as part of the process and making our game called Shuffle Wars. We'll continue doing art. We're going to continue doing audio, just different kinds of audio. In fact, the next thing I have to figure out is how to communicate to my vocal people what I actually want them from them is not words, but sounds. There are other things that I might have them do, but I think that's where they're going to shine. And so, have fun, do well, be good.